You're live, Andy.
Ready to go?
Yeah, you're live.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I'm sports psychologist Dr. Andrew Jacobs. I'm the host of the Sports Psychology Hour that airs every Sunday morning in Kansas City from 7 to 8 a.m. on 810WHB.com. And welcome tonight to our live stream event. You know, over the past few years, in addition to my radio show, which is on its 33rd year, we've launched the Sports Psychology Hour as a podcast and now via live stream. And I want you to invite you to listen to go to my website, listen in on winnersunlimited.com, where you can click on the podcast tab and listen to close to 10 years of my show. And that's winnersunlimited.com. Now, I've been doing a whole series here on our Facebook Live shows about conversations about coaching and athletes. And tonight, we're extremely privileged to have a good friend of mine. His name's Dave Grylls. I've known him for over 40 years. And before I even get started with it, Dave was on the 84 Olympic team. That's him right there when he won a silver medal at the team pursuit squad. That's me there in the white shirt. An individual I've spent hours with, I respect immensely, and we've reconnected here over the past few months. And I'm real excited to have him on the show tonight because Dave has a tremendous wealth of experience, not just as an Olympic athlete, a professional athlete, but as a coach. So, my friend, it's great seeing you again. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Andy. It's good to be here. And, we're hitting on a couple of my favorite subjects, which are cycling and then youth sports in general. And trying to not only get good athletes, but get good people out of in the outcome of coaching and being part of people's lives.
Well, before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about how we met. How when I started working with the cycling team, it was 1982 in June, and I had driven home from grad school in San Diego in August 1981. I stopped at the Olympic Training Center with the assistant head of sports medicine, who wasn't interested in hiring a sports psychologist. Said that we didn't need that. Then the following June, I got a phone call from Mark Hodges, one of the coaches, and said, "We're interested. We got your name from the sports medicine department. We want to hire a sports psychologist." So I came out to the Colorado Springs and met our illustrious coach, Eddie Borisevich. And Eddie's response to me was, "It's time for a psychologist. Good for you. Do what I say or don't come here." Anyway, it's typical of Eddie, right? So
very typical of Eddie.
But I worked with the team through 1988, with the exception of 87. And Dave was one of the first cyclists I met. We spent a lot of time together. I respect him immensely. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't know how to put a bike together, because he always helped me with that. So before we get into coaching and everything, Dave, let's just talk a little bit about how sports psychology started with the team and the role that I played and why that was important, because that's going to lead in everything else we talk about tonight.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because you all of a sudden there's this new person in the coaching entourage, and you came in and there's this new person here, just kind of there, didn't necessarily know a whole lot about cycling in and of itself.
I didn't know anything outside of getting on a bike and
I was being gracious there. But he came in and he started talking with us. And the sport of cycling is very interesting in that 90% of the time it's an individual sport that you're there. Even when you're trying to make an Olympic team, it's all about getting the correct times. It's all about working hard on your own to be able to qualify and be part of what ends up being a team. And you need to be able to work through that. And without any assistance, which we didn't have any before you showed up, it was very difficult because there are a lot of different personalities that were involved.
That's an understatement.
I had already been on the 80 Olympic team, which did not go to Moscow because of the boycott for Afghanistan. All of that seems like silly ancient history at this point. But there were a few of us. There were, I'd say, about a third of the 80 team decided to stick it out till 84. And I would be honest with you, if I had gone to the Olympics in 80, no matter what the result, the prospect of me being around for 84 would have been low. I would have gone back to university and things like that immediately. And a number of the riders did. So now all of a sudden we've got a couple of old guys, a couple of seasoned guys, which were myself and Hard Knits, and we got this whole entourage of half a dozen other guys trying to make up the other two spots. Some of the people we knew, some of the people we didn't know, and it was a very interesting dynamic. And having you show up,
to say the least, yes, it was.
Yeah. Have you show up and be able to be there. For me, I can remember a couple of exercises you had done, but for me, it became somebody that I could kind of soundboard with when I got frustrated with either the other athletes or Eddie B or whatever. And to fill that out, Eddie B was an old style Polish national champion, Olympian, and things like that. Spoke very little English, was very much of the my way or the highway kind of bent. And I was an engineering student. Okay. Well, being a cyclist and being an engineering student. And I often I wanted reasons why we were doing things. I was the inquisitive, outspoken American, and he was no, we do it my way. Don't ask.
Or the highway.
Yeah. And so needless to say, it was tumultuous for me. And I know we had a couple of late nights sitting in motel rooms, God, I don't know what to do, Andy. I don't know what to do. But my funniest reminiscence, sorry, I are an engineer, not a talker, was you came in and you wanted us all to do some relaxation stuff. And so we're all in the weight room and there must have been, I'd say 20 athletes in there. And you had us lay back and sit back and visualize thoughts and all this other stuff. And almost up to going om. And after you kind of found me, you said, well, Dave, did you get anything out of it? I said, no, not really. He said, I knew you wouldn't. And that's one of my, that's one of my number one reminiscences of working with you. And then over the last few months chatting again, you brought some stuff up to make me rethink things that happened. Some of the things I didn't really remember because there's a lot of pressure, especially right around the Olympics. And then
especially because it was in the United States and LA, but
yeah, there was a huge amount of pressure. There were false reports of things. There were things that were going on that weren't necessary, not to go into all of that. But there were things that were going on that could be seen as irregular. The rules and who was going to ride and what you had to do to qualify. Under Eddie B, they changed all the time. So
it was like water coming out of a faucet. You didn't know what was going to come out next.
Yeah, you didn't know what was going to happen. I remember the year before, I didn't even go to the Nationals. I skipped the Nationals because the Pan Am Games, the Nationals fit in right between our trials for the Pan Am Games and the Pan Am Games. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to do all of those events. And I didn't go to Nationals partly because I needed the extra time off and not traveling. And also because I didn't want to give Eddie a reason to not let me do my individual pursuiting, which I ended up winning at the Pan Am Games and held the Pan Am record for a number of years.
1983.
In 83. And that was kind of part of the stress around what went on. And I will tell you, one of the things I stress to athletes and to people is to use your experiences to help you make the right choices as you move forward. And I will tell you, I learned a lot of things from Eddie B. And no offense to him, but there were a lot of things that he did to us as athletes that I learned to never do. So sometimes you have to learn from failure as much as you learn from success.
And that was part of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was part of, I think, I know one of the things that I spent a lot of time with you as well as everybody else on was talking about how to balance all that out. And the thing that I liked was that you guys accepted me pretty quickly. It took, you had to meet me and get to know who I was, but I would come out to the Colorado Springs about 3 or 4 times a year. And then in 83, I went to the World Championships, 84, the Olympics, 85, the World Championships, 86, the World Championships. So I was with you guys at big competitions. And I think the key thing for someone in my position was developing the trust with you guys.
Absolutely.
I had to have Eddie's trust, but I had to have the trust of the competitors. And I know you were special.
And
you and I had a good relationship with that.
And you were such a good-looking 30-year-old.
Yeah, thanks. Well, the fact of the matter is, I learned a tremendous amount from all of you, especially you. You and I had lengthy conversations about a lot of things, and one of the things that stands out to me was after the team pursuit completed, where we won a silver medal, which you were a big part of that. You and Pat McDonough and I went down to the beach, and when we went down to the beach, we talked about what's going to go on. And I recall you saying, what am I going to do now? I've been in cycling and everything. And we talked about, going back to school, pursuing your degrees and things like that. I remember that. And that's something that a lot of athletes, I think, today are maybe more aware of than back then. Because back then it was like you had to focus on your sport 100%, put everything into it, give up everything else. And I remember Nelson Vales, who won a silver medal in the match sprints, got into cycling he was a bike messenger in New York City, and he watched a bike race in Central Park and decided, hey, I'm going to enter this. He's an African-American guy from the inner city and ends up blowing everybody away and starts winning and ends up getting a spot at the Olympic Training Center as the developmental rider. And above his bed, he was in the top bed of a bunk bed. He had an Olympic medal. It was the first thing he saw when he woke up every morning. It was the last thing he saw every night when he went to bed. And he was committed to that. And you had to do that at that time to really do well. And you gave up so much in one sense to commit to the team, resulting in a silver medal, which I know if we go back on that to me was one of the most exciting memories of my career as a sports psychologist, was working with you all, because we overcame so much and accomplished a lot. And I think for you, I know it's carried on with you as you've gone into coaching and working with a lot of young athletes.
Yeah, I'm sad to say this, but one of the people that really pushed me into coaching, her name was Doreen Smith when she was single, Doreen Smith Williams. Unfortunately, she passed away of a myeloma cancer like a couple of weeks ago, and very hard for me. And I've had so many friends come through and back me up. But she's one of the people we got together in about 84, 85, after 84, about 85, 86, we put in for money from LA 84 to set up the youth programs down in San Diego at the Velodrome down in San Diego, which is where a lot of our trials were from the late 70s through to the early 80s.
And that's where you lived at the time, correct?
And that's where I lived at the time, going to school at San Diego State, finishing my engineering degree. And we were able to get programs started that the basis of those programs are still going now, 40 years later, with the help of a few other volunteers and people that kept things moving. When both Doreen and I left, we had other people who jumped right in and kept things going under the same philosophies, this sport is for everyone. So kids, you come in, we had bikes to loan them, didn't charge them anything, and we're there for them 2-3 days a week. We had great support from the board of directors all the way through that allowed us to develop programs. And we've had athletes on various Olympic teams. Jim Valente, who just got a couple of gold medals in Paris. is an athlete that was brought to the sport and came through the sport because those programs existed, and I'm extremely proud of that. And things like that.
With your background now, going from a competitor to an athlete, as a competitive athlete to a coach, how was that transition for you? And what did you learn as far as coaching athletes, especially from such a controversial guy like Eddie V, who was very demanding, very into what he felt was right? You know, it's sort of my way or the highway sometimes with him. So how did that help you develop as a coach and work with young athletes?
So as a coach, and especially when you go in, you start with youth. Okay. You're introducing youth to something new. Okay. You've got to be able to go in and show your joy of being there and working with them, as much as worrying about where they get. So every time you run a workout, there's got to be some pleasure in it. You don't want to go out and just beat yourself up every day over and over and over again. And, you've got to make training fun. You've got to make learning fun. You've got to keep stressing that all sports, but especially cycling, is very incremental. It's step by step by step. And with youth athletes, young athletes, you really have to reward each little success. So you have to be there when they do better every time. You're there to say, hey, this is the best 100 meters you've ever run, or this is the best flying 200 you've ever done. There are a few things that are standard in track cycling that are kind of standard times that they use all the way from when you first begin to the world championships. For a sprinter, they've still got to do a flying 200. So when you do your first one at 10 years old, you're happy when you get 20 seconds to do 200 meters. When you're in the world championships, I think the world record's in the 7 seconds now. But and a lot of that's because the sport's evolved. There's a lot more science to the sport. There's fancier equipment in the sport and other things, but that's a whole different story. But you need to be able to find ways to keep the kids involved.
So let me ask you a question. Let me interrupt you for a second. So,
yep.
coaching kids. I co-wrote the book "Just Let Them Play: Guiding Parents, Coaches, and Athletes Through Youth Sports." Always like to promote it on here, but it's been called the Bible of Youth Sports by Ben Sherwood of Mojo Sports. And one of the things we talk about in there is embracing failure can lead to fun. It's one of our chapters. And just no matter what, when you're starting a new sport, we're talking about, it could be cycling or it could be tetherball. It doesn't matter what it is. You're going to fail. And so, and we talked about, failure extensively with the Olympics and everything. But for coaching young kids, how do you coach them to learn about failure and embrace it and learn from it rather than to be scared of it and fearful of it?
So there are a couple of techniques that I use, and I really like to have my parents know these techniques. And I learned these because my parents weren't into cycling at all. And I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in the Detroit area, and some of the biggest races were like race weekends in Chicago or Milwaukee or Cincinnati. And so here I am, a 16-year-old kid trying to get started in cycling and having to go on these weekend trips that my parents didn't really have any involvement with. And so this is the mid 70s, the times were different, but not necessarily better or worse. But we'd load up on Friday night, 2, 3, 4, 16 to 18-year-old kids and go drive 300 miles, spend a night either at somebody's house or in a motel or something, race all weekend, drive home on Sunday evening, sometimes getting home after dropping everybody off at 2 or 3 in the morning.
And you had to fill the car up with gas, didn't you?
There were 2 rules, okay? Dave, you don't miss any school for this. And 2, if your mom's car left here with a full tank of gas, damn well better have a full tank of gas in it on Monday morning. And those were the 2 main rules. And there were plenty of mornings when I got home at 3 a.m. that I slept for a couple or 3 hours, got up to go to school, I made it to school. It was a pretty worthless day at school because I was half sleeping at my desk most of the time. But usually on Monday nights, growing up where I did, we sat down to family dinners. My dad went to law school a lot of time, and he was not home every night of the week. But on Monday nights, we'd sit down to dinner, and they'd ask me, well, how'd the weekend go? What happened? And so rather than have to give them this long story, I developed these three questions I had to answer. What happened that was better than has ever happened to me in a race? So maybe I finished with the field the first time, or, maybe I countered an attack really well, or something else. So what did I do really well so that I could own some positive stuff? What did I try that didn't go the way I had it planned? So maybe I tried something in the final sprint and wasn't able, or I inadvertently gave somebody a lead out and they beat me in the final sprint. Okay. And then 2 questions, and it depends on where you are and what you're talking about. One is what did I learn over this course of events, whether it's a soccer tournament or bicycle race weekend or something else, or what do I want to work on the most to get better for the next time? And I love telling that to parents of any youth age person. I told it to a couple of the women that I was working with in my last job, and they were talking about their 8-year-old daughter starting soccer. And I said, okay, Mom, your responsibility as a parent is to make sure she eats well, make sure she gets to practices and games, and has the equipment she needs. But for that, she owes you the answer to those 3 questions. I said, wait till the next day, never do it right after the event. You can't say anything. You can't question her about it or say anything about it, but she needs to answer these 3 questions. What did you do better than you've ever done before? What did you try that didn't go the way you had it planned? And what are you going to tell coach, or what are you going to work on next? And I really believe in those 3 things because they're true of your whole life from here on out.
Right.
Whether you walk into a business meeting with somebody you've never met, when you walk out of that, you need to do those same things. Hey, what did we connect on? What was I talking about that we kind of missed on? And what am I going to work on so that we have a better talk next time or a better relationship next time? So the best part of that is now the athlete owns their development. Okay.
Which excuse me if I can interrupt you, because I think that's tremendous advice, because what you're doing is you're taking the parents out of the equation and letting the athletes take ownership of what they do.
And a good coach is going to do the same thing. A good coach is, the next time they get together for a workout, he's not going to say, hey, I saw you do this and it was great, but I saw you do this and it sucked. You don't want to do that. And there are too many coaches.
Well, explain why, Dave.
Well,
I agree 100%, but why do you want to say that?
There are a couple of reasons. One, the biggest reason for me is that what I just said about the athlete needing to be able to see their development through their own eyes. Okay, and you also need to keep in mind now if the athlete says, well, I want to work on this, but the coach thinks they should be working on something else, then the coach needs to adapt a little bit both ways. A little bit towards what the athlete's looking for and a little bit on what he thinks the athlete needs, but he also needs to be able to explain that to the athlete. Okay. And that gets difficult. We're talking 8-year-olds here. I mean, 8, 10, 12-year-olds, and they can't always see it, but you've got to keep the experience as positive as you can.
What do you think today? Okay, not just in cycling, but in youth sports in general. I just 2 weeks ago gave the keynote address to the National Alliance of Youth Sports Annual Convention about youth sports and the status of youth sports today. What I think is wrong with it, which there's a lot. I spoke to over 300 sports administrators from all over the country, as well as in military installations around the world, and I think there's this pressure to win and pressure to come in first place at such young ages instead of learning about growth and development. Roger Federer and Alex Morgan this past summer, there was an article about both of them where they're both quoted, and they both mentioned they played multiple sports until they're about 14, 15. That's when they focused specifically on tennis and soccer, and they played team sports. I know in individual sports, when I was the University of Kansas sports psychologist back in the early 80s, I spent 1 year with the basketball team when Larry Brown was the coach. And I remember a conversation I had with Larry one time. And he told me, he said, Andy, I think all kids should play a team sport and an individual sport. A team sport because they learn about sharing and working together. Individual sports because they got to learn about confidence. And I think that's so important. People think cycling or riding a bike. Well, you were part of the team pursuit. It's a team event. Mm-hmm. And there had to be tremendous trust for all of you guys to work together, or we would have never resulted in a silver medal in the Olympics. And I think that's where I think the job of a coach in part comes in to instill that confidence and belief, but also get everybody to learn about when you fail, how you pick yourself up and move on rather than stay on the ground.
You're absolutely right. But I like to say one other thing. And you went in two different directions there. You got started. One of the things that I cringe about is we don't have just like where I grew up, they had like a Saturday opt-in day camp with the neighborhood club. And you'd go over to one of the junior high schools and you'd play basketball and you do this and that. But it was just fun time. It was like
with
going
no
out.
Coaches telling you what to do.
Right. You had people there keeping you safe. You had people there kind of giving you tips or making sure that you weren't playing dodgeball instead of basketball, which often it degraded to, but things like that. So there was just.
But it wasn't an organized practice with coaches instructing you. It was just
there wasn't necessarily
the idea of playing
organized stuff, and I see less and less of that. The other thing that I worry about is we don't have just recreational leagues as much, especially in sports like soccer and even cycling. It's not like there's just a club ride to go on, or there's not like those things. Everything becomes a competition, and that's not good.
And why not? In your opinion, why not? I agree 100%. But tell us.
Because you need to have joy when you do things. And if every time you go to something and somebody's telling you what you're doing wrong, which most coaches, most
parents,
unfair statement, a lot of youth coaches, it's easy to find something wrong. It's easy to put somebody down. You're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong. It's really hard to be able to, especially if you're doing it with a group of people, pull one person to the side and say, you're doing this almost perfect.
So let me ask you a question.
As a coach. Yeah.
We've got a few minutes left here, and I want to get your opinions on these. So, I mean, you won a silver medal in a team event in the '84 Olympics, which is the epitome of sport, participating in the Olympics. Well, being on an Olympic team and winning a medal.
No, I agree.
I know. Had we won the gold medal, we would have gone on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, but unfortunately, that didn't happen. Which Steve Haig, who won the gold medal in the team pursuit, will always hold over my head because we didn't go to the Johnny Carson show when he won a gold medal in the individual pursuit. Anyway, I want to get into three definitions from you.
Okay.
Since you've been at the pinnacle of what it's all about. What is Dave Grylls' definition of winning?
When I'm
putting
a
you on the
coach,
spot, my friend. Putting you on the spot here.
No, you're not. When I'm a coach or when I'm an athlete. So for me, as a coach, I say there's only one person gets first place. Okay, or one team. But if every time you go and you compete, or if you train really hard, you walk out of there with knowledge. It might be about one of your competitors' weaknesses, or it might be about one of your strengths, or it might be that the girl over on the backstretch was really cute and whatever. But if you walk out of there with knowledge, and you learn something every time you compete, you're a winner. It's got nothing to do with the place you got. It's got everything to do about where you're going to be tomorrow and what you're going to work on tomorrow, which is, again, I'll fall back to the 3 questions. It's exactly the same thing.
And I'm going to come back to what you just, I'm going to come back to what you said there after we finish the next 2. Your definition of losing.
That's a tough one. I've had things that have happened in my life that I'm not proud of or haven't been pleasant. I don't go back on my life and rethink things, because I believe that every time I made a decision, that I made the best decision I could make based on what I knew at the time. Okay. A loser to me is somebody who goes back and regrets the directions they've picked or chosen to take based on new information that didn't exist at the time they had to make the decision. Okay. I know that might be a little esoteric when you walk out of it, but I've been an engineer for 40 years, and I'm really proud of everything I've done as an engineer.
And as an engineer, things are black and white, right? Things are black and white. There isn't a lot of gray area in being an engineer.
No, there's a lot of gray area. There's a lot of gray area there's gray area in everything. And if you lock yourself into just the pure black and whites, then you miss all of the nuances of things. So engineering isn't all about numbers and making straight lines and this and that and the other stuff. There's a lot of imagination. There's a lot of intuition. There's a lot of experience that goes into the products that we use every day, or the airplanes we fly on, or the cars we drive. There's a whole lot of assumptions made that you can't calculate, and you've got to be able to go with that. That's true of sports. It's true of life. It's true especially true of coaching.
So okay. My last definition is self-confidence. What's that mean to you?
So one of the things I say to a lot of people, I have 3 sons, and I've told them this: there's a fine line between cockiness and confidence. It's a very, very
100%. Agree 100%.
It's a very, very fine line, and there are going to be people that I've known my whole life that are going to swear I'm the cockiest SOB they've ever met. But there are other people that know other portions of me and realize.
Excuse me one second. I want to comment on that. The reason, I'll be a psychologist here. The reason you said that about yourself is because you are not afraid to express what you think and feel. And because Absolutely. You're very, very expressive, that as I've known you all these years, even though it's been years since we've talked, you were never afraid to say what you thought. And that's not, to me, cockiness. It's confidence. It's the belief that I'm comfortable enough, even with Eddie B., our coach. Yeah. And let's face it, you and Eddie had your conflicts. In fact, I don't know if you recall, we spent one night at the Olympic Training Center in my room from 7:00 at night to 7 in the morning with him, the 3 of us, to try to work something out. We ordered Domino's pizza twice that night because you were convinced you were right and he was convinced he was right, but we worked it out because we came to a conclusion. And so anyway, you display that in a constructive way.
I have been misunderstood at times. My wife will tell me, Dave, sometimes you're just too open, too honest about what you're thinking and what you're feeling and what the situation is. And I've seen it both in business and as an engineer and in business, that if I see something that doesn't feel right, I'm going to bring it up. Sometimes I don't bring it up in the best, most positive way.
Well, there is tact that's involved.
Yes, and unfortunately, sometimes I don't always have the tact I need. When I'm working with the kids, it's not about having it's about relating to them on the level that they're at, depending on where they are.
So confidence then would mean what to you if you had to define it specifically?
Confidence is being comfortable with, 1, who you are, and 2, what you either know or have experienced. That's a confidence. A cockiness to me is taking all the situations around you and saying, believing your own good press without necessarily any self-analysis, without any real thought. It's just, I'm here, I've done this. The worst thing for me is when you get somebody who, especially when they're younger, and I'll say that, and I'm saying younger as being, hell, under 35, and they do something and they say to themselves, this is a pinnacle of my life. I've achieved what I'm going to ever achieve.
And so, Dave, let me, as we wrap things up here, I want to share something, which I'm not even sure you know, but when I got out of grad school in August 1981, July 31st, 1981, I got my PhD, and I started with you guys in June of 1982, and you guys accepted me. Took a little while for some of you. You accepted me pretty quickly, as did several other guys, but took a while for some people. And but I think I learned so much from all of you that's helped me in my career all these 44 years. But after the Olympic, before the Olympics, we got briefed by the FBI about terrorists in Mexico. I don't know if you remember that or not. And we got this briefing because they were showing us Iranian terrorists down in Mexico. And after that meeting, we had the Team Pursuit Squad, we had a meeting about that, and we were talking about team goals, team strengths, weaknesses, fears, distractions. And it was in that meeting, one of our cyclists, Mark Whitehead, who was controversial to begin with himself, but anyway, he came up with the idea. He says, well, if you're going to be with us in the Olympics, then if we get kidnapped by terrorists, we'll sacrifice you first to let us go. That was the first time all of you came to an agreement on one thing, which is getting rid of me. But it was when you guys came together as a group, and we set goals and things like that. Our goals in the Olympics was to win a medal, which we did, break the American record, which we did, but most importantly, be a team, stay together, overcome adversity and controversy, which we had a lot of that. And partially because of you, we were able to do that because of your coming in and as the first alternate and coming on the second day and riding and doing well and helping us get to the finals. And so my practice has been called the winning edge all these years. And that name came up from what you guys did by coming in second place, but you were winners, in my opinion, because you accomplished all your goals. Even though we didn't get that gold medal, we got a silver medal. We accomplished our goals, and part of it because of what you contributed to. So I want to thank you for what you did by being part of that team, but also being open-minded to having a sports psychologist in there and working with this guy. Like, who is this dude?
We were all wacky. We all needed it, whatever help we could get. But you brought something up just now, and I use it with my own boys quite a bit, is what's the difference between a dream and a goal? Okay. A goal is something you put in effort and you work for. A dream is something you just wish for and hope it can happen. And, so you need to have dreams, but in order to succeed, you have to take those dreams and I'm going to say mechanize. It's not mechanize, but it's realize that you have to put in effort to make it happen. And at that point, it's a goal. And, those are really important things to understand as a good human, as a good member of society and other things. You're going to make mistakes. So hopefully you don't make mistakes that put you in jail or hurt you or hurt somebody else, but you're going to make mistakes. But you have to learn how to find, and I don't want to call it the silver cloud behind every dark cloud, but you have to find out, you have to take those experiences, put those pieces together so that you've learned something out of it. It's just like being a winner. We just talked about being a winner. You crashed in the race, right? I had a couple of those that were just nasty. And you had to be able to look at it and say, okay, where was I when it happened? What happened when it happened? What am I not going to do next time? Or what am I going to do next time so that this doesn't happen again? And that's all part of goal setting. It's all part of taking something to a level beyond where you dream it could be, to take it to some point of reality and within your life. It could be going to school. It could be becoming an actor. It could be being a great athlete. It could be being a hell of a sports psychologist. You know.
Well, listen,
I know talking to you, you've achieved things beyond the things that you originally thought you were going to go and become and do. You've worked with people. You've helped people. You've made things happen that couldn't have happened without your, I'm gonna be a little bit facetious here, your smidgen of input. Okay. And that's what people need to understand. And that's one of the things I really stress for my athletes. I'm as proud of, I've got one female athlete that just graduated from the Air Force Academy. I've got another one who just started at the Naval Academy, and her very first NCAA or very first triathlon as a midshipman, she won her division. You know, as a freshman just starting university, she got 35th in the NCAAs.
That's awesome.
You know, in their triathlon.
Awesome.
And these are the people that I like to know. I've got engineers, I've got doctors, I've got lawyers, I've got biomedicine people. I've got all of these people that are my kids.
Well, listen, we got to wrap things up here. And it has been nothing but a privilege, and I mean this sincerely, to know you and to have been associated. And it's great that we've reconnected again. You've got so much knowledge. So if people want to get a hold of you, Dave, how can they reach you? How can they get information?
I'm on Facebook, so I'm usually there. It's Dave Grylls, Grylls. My call sign is barbecue, so I sign everything with a BBQ. So you can go through Facebook. If you try to friend me, send me a little note, because you can send a note to somebody before they accept you as a friend, and let me know what you want. I'm just a huge believer that sports should be available to everyone, and we're slowly as a society going to pay to play in way too many sports. Yeah. And what used to be easy to make the high school volleyball or football team or track and field team becomes harder and harder, because there are more and more athletes getting, I'm making air quotes here, professional coaching through pay to play. Yeah. I had to play around with it with my kids, and it made life much tougher than life was for me.
Well, you and I are on the same page with all this. I cannot thank you enough for being with us tonight. And, you know, if you've enjoyed our conversation, go to my website, which is winnersunlimited.com. Click on the podcast tab. You can listen to this show and dozens of podcasts that I've done over the years. And if you want to get a hold of me, check out winnersunlimited.com. Send me an email at drj@winnersunlimited.com. Give me a call at my office, 816-561-5556. And I'm now on TikTok at Dr. Andrew Jacobs. Dave Grylls, my friend, it's been great having you on. Thanks so much, man.
Thank you. It's been great getting back with you. Now I got to do one more jab. I'm an old Detroiter, so watch out for my Lions.
Well, watch out for the Chiefs, because we're going on a three-peat, buddy. All right, take care.
It's tough. Okay. It's tough road to hoe. Remember the difference between dreams and goals.